5 seconds to go. In the Supreme Court of India, a writ petition was filed under Article 32 of the Constitution challenging the constitutional validity of certain provisions of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002. The petitioners contended that the procedure prescribed under the Act violated the fundamental rights guaranteed under Articles 14, 19, and 21 of the Constitution. They argued that the powers of arrest, attachment, and confiscation granted to the Enforcement Directorate were arbitrary and without adequate safeguards. The learned senior counsel appearing for the petitioners submitted that the twin conditions for bail under Section 45 of the Act created an unreasonable restriction on the personal liberty of the accused. It was further submitted that the procedure followed by the authorities was contrary to the basic principles of criminal jurisprudence, as the burden of proof was shifted upon the accused even before a formal charge was established. The Solicitor General, appearing on behalf of the Union of India, strongly defended the validity of the Act. He submitted that the offence of money laundering posed a serious threat to the economic stability of the nation and that stringent measures were necessary to curb such offences. He further contended that Parliament had consciously enacted the law keeping in view India's international obligations under the United Nations Convention Against Corruption and the Financial Action Task Force recommendations. The Honorable Bench, comprising the Chief Justice and the two companion judges, observed that while the object of the Act was undoubtedly to prevent the generation and circulation of black money, the procedure adopted must still conform to the constitutional guarantee of fairness. The court noted that economic offences, though grave in nature, could not justify the denial of basic procedural rights to the accused. The bench further observed that the power of arrest must always be exercised with restraint and in accordance with law. The court also expressed concern over the absence of transparency in the recording of statements by Enforcement Directorate under Section 50 of the Act. The bench questioned whether such statements being recorded without the presence of counsel could be treated as voluntary and admissible. The Solicitor General responded that adequate safeguards were already in place and that officers of the Enforcement Directorate were bound by departmental guidelines ensuring fairness. He submitted that the presumption of innocence was not taken away by the Act but merely balanced against the necessity of maintaining the integrity of investigations. The court, however, observed that procedural fairness was not a matter of discretion but a constitutional requirement. It emphasized that even in cases involving grave economic offenses, the rights of the accused could not be diluted beyond reasonable limits. The Honorable Court further held that the twin conditions for bail must be read in a manner that harmonizes the purpose of the act with the fundamental right to liberty. It was observed that unless the investigating agency could demonstrate that the accused was likely to tamper with evidence or influence witnesses, bail should not be denied merely because of the seriousness of the allegations. The court also discussed the issue of attachment of property under Section 5 of this Act. It was noted that the power of provisional attachment could lead to severe hardship if exercised without due care. The court directed that before passing any attachment order, the authorities must record reasons in writing and furnish a copy to the affected person. It was further held that the adjudicating authority must provide a reasonable opportunity of hearing before confirming such attachment. The bench clarified that the right to property, through no longer a fundamental right, remained a valuable constitutional and legal right under Article 300A. Therefore, deprivation of poverty could not be allowed without adherence to due process of law. The court also addressed the issue of burden of proof under Section 24 of the Act. It was held that while certain presumptions were permissible in economic offenses, such presumptions must operate only after the prosecution establishes foundational facts. The court cautioned that reversing the burden of proof at an early stage would violate the principles of natural justice. The judgment also discussed the importance of judicial oversight in matters involving personal liberty. The bench observed that arrest should never be a matter of routine and that the liberty of a citizen must not be curtailed unless absolutely necessary. It further recommended that the Enforcement Directorate maintain a transparent record of the grounds of arrest and supply the same to the accused at the earliest opportunity. In conclusion, the Honorable Supreme Court upheld the constitutional validity of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act but read down certain provisions to ensure conformity with the principles of fairness and reasonableness. The court directed the Union government to frame comprehensive guidelines regulating the exercise of powers under the Act. It further recommended that periodic judicial review of the functioning of the Enforcement Directorate be concluded to maintain public confidence in the judicial system. The judgment was hailed as a balanced decision that safeguarded both the integrity of the financial system and the fundamental rights of individuals. Legal experts observed that the ruling reaffirmed the Supreme Court's role as the guardian of constitutional rights. The bench concluded by stating that in a constitutional democracy, the fight against corruption must not come at the cost of personal liberty, and the rule of law must prevail over the rule of authority.